As Future Times, as queer Ugandans, like I said, Future Times is a media platform created as a reaction to how mainstream media reported on LGBTI issues or wrote about LGBTI stories or the discussions around the anti-homosexuality law of 2014 at that time. And we realized that many of these media platforms, we've all seen the "Why are you gay?" Thing when Pepe went to NBS and it became a whole thing. Sempa came with these cucumbers and said, "Blah, blah, 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 blah." And the the producers or whoever was moderating that conversation let it run because made it as a laughing situation because Pepe was a queer person talking about queer people and Sempa was whoever Sempa is, maybe a religious person coming, a faith person coming from a faith group supported to come to this platform and have that space. So who owns the narrative is, for us, we find that the people for whom our stories are a cash cow. That you bring, you talk about LGBTI stories, you write, how you write about them is to sell the paper and not to discuss the actual lives behind those stories. So the people who own the platforms, the people for whom we make money when our stories are told, not for the purpose of discussing what it would mean to bring up a law that says as a lesbian woman, I should be subjected to life imprisonment if they find that my partner is living with a disability. Because then that is a thing, right? If you say, if when you write that story, you're writing it for the purpose of how many people are going to watch this story, how many clicks am I going to get? You own the power to push, to write that story, and how you write it makes you the owner of that narrative, right? So who owns the narrative is that, but also we as the story owners, we are finding our power in saying, you cannot just write about my story the way you want it. It is about my life. So as a queer person, I will use my voice and talk about my story because I need to defend my life. So as a story owner, I should own the narrative. But sadly, capitalism says whoever has the most money should influence what we do.
So I started practicing in January 2013. And by then I thought, it's very powerful and I'm a journalist and I'm the one who is putting out the stories. But then I realized later on that there is an editor above me. There is an owner of the media house above the editor. There is a board above that owner. And then there are advertisers above that board. And then there is a government above the advertisers. And in the end, you find that the narrative you are peddling is actually for the richest person in the room. So the people that have the money are deciding how we write about things, what we write about, and what we don't write about. And it keeps us in a cycle where stories sound and feel the same all across the board. If you listen to Ugandan media, the stories will be similar because there are certain lines that have been drawn that have become even unwritten rules that you can't talk about this, you can't write about the other. And that's why some of us have gone in the direction of independent media, where we now created our own media houses to be able to write independently. But even that, because of the business model, you find that you still are caged. Because like for me, I'm an investigative journalist. So I have to choose who to investigate and who not to investigate, because at the end of the day, I have a team that I have to pay. So I cannot investigate my biggest advertiser. And if my biggest advertiser is also interested in probably a contract to do a marathon that will be a marathon for the Uganda Catholic Episcopal Conference, maybe they have a marathon, just using that as an example. So let's assume the Catholic Episcopal Conference has a marathon, and then this advertiser of mine is, let's say, a telecom, and realizes, okay, MTN has their marathon, Airtel has the Kabaka's run, I also want a marathon. And then they say, okay, let's use Catholics, because there are also very many. And so you find that by extension, I will also be forced not to write about certain things, and the person influencing my decision is actually not even directly giving me money. They are giving money to an advertiser who then gives money to my board, who then gives money to me.
I partly agree, I partly disagree. Where I agree is the person with the biggest account will control the narrative. But where I disagree is that over time I've noticed people's value systems determine which narratives they peddle and which narratives they influence. For example, if a religious leader believes in polygamy, they will say it over and over and over again. It doesn't matter how much you challenge that narrative. Their value, the personal value system is telling them, this is what I believe in. Now, if a news producer, the hierarchy that Daniel has talked about in any media company, if that pro-polygamous religious leader giving the narrative over and over again lands, or that story lands in the hands of a news producer who shares the same value system, they're going to amplify it. In the end, it depends on what you actually believe in. Trust me, with newsrooms, if a producer or a reporter doesn't believe in anything, in a particular topic, they'll not write about it. They'll either declare conflict of interest to the editor, or they'll challenge the story until that story is not done. So at the end, every story comes with an interest of either the writer, the producer, or the person at the top. It comes back to what they believe in, their value system.
Where do we draw the line between personal biases and actually doing the duty that we said we would do when we're telling the news?
I'll give an example. Pumla the other time was giving advice to women: don't give men money, because they'll use that same money to marry other women. And she talked for 1 hour and a half, but that was the center of discussion across digital platforms. So what determines that if somebody has talked for 1 hour and a half, I should pick 30 seconds of their conversation or of their argument, and that shapes my story? It comes to you as a reporter. What do you see as a story? It is shaped by internalized personal values that you consider this is newsworthy, this is not. So where you draw the line now comes to, we go back to the gatekeepers. Is my editor Daniel able to see through my story and say, I can see some bias here? Is he able to do his job as a gatekeeper? Both the editor, and there are so many gatekeepers in media companies. So now gatekeepers are the ones to say, you're wrong here. This is not the company policy. This is, draw the line. I see personal biases there. If gatekeeping is weak, those are the biases. You read a story and you're like, you're mad. You're like, how did this go through like that?
So what I'm hearing is, if these stories that are not palatable, let me just use that word, that are not, it's a big that are not making news, that don't make money, that people don't want to. So are we saying that, so they're not palatable? Yeah, they're not, people are not willing to sponsor such stories? And also the journal, Carlton called it the emotion, is it the personal values of the journalist? There's no journalist in the newsroom who has a personal value attached to such stories, especially stories on human rights. How are we going to tell those stories?
So there are theories that control this whole mass communication. So mass communication and journalism is both a science and an art at the same time. And I'm going to explain the correlation where we meet between the science and the art side of it. So one of the theories, the agenda setting theory, and that theory states that if whatever we journalists want you to talk about is what you will talk about. So the media is setting the agenda. But of course, right now we are now researching certain things like algorithms and how they're influencing. So it looks like an AI is actually setting the agenda, not us. But that I've not yet proven that theory. So probably if I complete my research and I prove that theory, maybe it will disprove the agenda setting theory, and then I will win a Nobel Prize, probably. hopefully one that I will not have to force some woman from Colombia to give me, like a certain president of a certain country who doesn't like journalists. But that's besides the point. So because we are both a science and an art, we are inherently biased because artists are biased. Every artist writes about or paints about or creates about what they love or what they're interested in. So if an artist loves nature, animals, forests, you will see that in what they paint, in what they are musicians, they will sing about forests, they'll sing about the ocean breeze and whatever. If an artist has, if their heart has been broken, famously, Taylor Swift wrote a whole album abusing men because she had gotten through a heartbreak, you know? So even us as journalists, we write about, and Carlton was very right, we write about things that we love or that we care about. But then the science comes in, because the science is now where we have to discuss the balance of the story. We have to now consider the law. What is the law saying? But there is a way around it, because if I want to write about, let's say, the rights of LGBTQ plus people in Uganda, and the law is, putting a stop somewhere, there is a way I can write about it while circumventing the law. Some lawyers tell me that we need to learn the law in order to learn how to do it, how to break it. So you study the law not to follow it, but you study the law to know how to break it and not go to jail. So as artists, artists always find a way. Even during the times of prohibition in the US, during the times when it was not allowed for women to practice certain industries, artists still found a way to write about it. One of the most famous books is The Animal Farm. And The Animal Farm was an artist writing about something that would have gotten him otherwise killed. But because he wrote about animals, he found a way to circumvent the law of the land at that moment, the Soviet Union, and actually wrote a story about government and how the government was doing wrong things to its own people. And I think it was years later that the government realized this guy was not actually talking about animals. He was talking about us. So I think that it is very important for you to understand that these journalists are not just, of course, we posture. Some journalists will posture and say we are independent, we just write. But the truth is, I don't choose everything. So I think now the challenge is getting the journalists and their editors interested in some of these stories, because even if those stories are not selling, even if they don't have advertisers, even if they don't have a lot of support from the general public, even if their stories about minorities, a journalist who is interested in that story will tell it. If anything, we are actually trained to look out for stories about minorities, stories that are less talked about.
So Ruth, what are we going to do if no one has interest in the stories of human rights? According to what Daniel is saying, the problem is people are not interested in these stories. What's the way forward? As somebody who runs a whole media house on stories that people are not interested in, apparently.
I remember when we were starting Kuchi Time, we were asked a question like, what kind of media house do you want to do? What kind of journalism do you want to do? And we said, what is your focus? What do you want out of this? We said we are looking at changing how people view LGBTI people, how people write, how people understand who we are. We also want to put a face to the thing that they have told Ugandans to fear. So someone who says, I've never seen a lesbian person, let's put a face to it and say, okay, this is who it is. So let's see from there where the conversation goes. I, as a lesbian woman, I have a responsibility to speak up for myself, because at the end of the day, it is my life at risk. The more I really feel like if in 2007, 2008, when we first had the conversation on I think 2007, 2009, when Bahati introduces the bill to Parliament, if journalists had picked interest to see what is the issue, what else is happening in Parliament at this point, between that time and now, when public attention has been turned to AHA, Uganda has passed over 53 amendments to the Constitution, and many of them that actually influence what we are seeing right now. If in 2009 the story had not focused on their gay for money, their after your children, if journalists had taken that objective journalism road and said, let's investigate, let's find these queer Ugandans, let Pepe come on this platform, and we fully hear what is it like, what, even if it's a stupid question like what makes you, how did you become
Why are you
gay? No. Fine. Even the question of why are you gay, if it had been asked while giving room to Pepe to respond and not make it a funny situation, we would have understood that at the bottom of these laws is just us giving the public something to be distracted with while we dismantle the constitution of the country. We would have gotten Ugandans this attention that we're seeing with the sovereignty bill. And many of us who have been in this struggle with the laws, with the parliament processes, are sitting back and saying, we knew this was going to come. When AHA came around, we told you what they're doing, that's chipping away at the human rights of people you consider a minority or some of us that you don't agree with. It will come for you. And now I think you're not seeing the queer community reacting and saying, Banang, the sovereignty bill, while it's coming, it's intended to do this. We've already lived with it. Over 23 years of saying, this parliament, this government is anti-people, is anti-human rights, and it's not just about us, the minority, but all of us, right? What do we do with the stories people don't? We use our voices. Our voices are ours. You can, even if the anti-homosexuality law of 2023 says, by holding space like this and discussing, we are promoting homosexuality and should go to prison for 20 or 10 years. Then so what? Like Lulu said, you'll not be able to arrest all of us. Yes, you come and threaten us and say by talking up as an LGBTI person, as a lesbian woman, you're breaking the law. But tell me, the prosecution process must prove that by me talking about my life as a lesbian woman, I recruited Samantha into going on and engaging in an act of homosexuality, and we caught her in the act. I wish journalism went far and interrogated that process. Like, yes, you're spending so much money on passing this bill, but how are you going to be able to enforce it? The danger in us saying some of these stories are not, what did you say, palatable? The danger in us saying that, choosing that some issues we can talk about, some issues we cannot talk about, is then we let important things fall through the gaps. So I do believe that journalists, you have a responsibility. Most so you're all in the mainstream with platforms and you have the backing. I know for a fact that if they came to pick us up from here, Carlton and Daniel would be safe because you're saying we're journalists. For us, we hear our cards, right? So promotion, it's not a thing. You have a responsibility to report these stories with that ethical understanding to do no harm. That instead of writing about, if let's say Samantha is a lesbian woman who was born in Kalere and something happened there and Samantha got beaten up and undressed and then taken to, let's not just talk about Samantha, lesbian woman was beaten. But where did that thing come from? The people who beat her. What does it mean for Samantha thereafter? Doesn't Samantha have human rights as a human being outside of her sexuality? Shouldn't we be protecting those? And I think oftentimes the Uganda society misunderstands what the organizing around LGBTI issues is. We're not asking for special rights for you to protect that. When you write about LGBTI people, you're promoting human rights, you're promoting LGBTI human rights. That's not a thing. We're asking you to be thoughtful about protecting my human rights way before you come to think about the kind of sex I'm having. Yeah? So the responsibility in that statement of do no harm must remain at the back of your mind when you're writing about our stories. If you're saying it's not, biases are inherent and I must write a story that I am passionate about, be passionate about the human rights, not the special things. Don't even write about, let my sexuality be an afterthought. Even that would be very welcoming of it. Like if Carlton chooses to write about me, a lesbian woman, being abused and subjected to corrective rape, which has really happened in the last few years. We've had a number of women who are reporting being sexually violated within their home settings. But what we hear about is it was a lesbian woman and that is okay. Does it take away the fact that they were violated? Does it take away the fact that they have human rights as an individual before their sex becomes a topic? So we must keep that responsibility to say, when I'm writing this story, where it does harm, if I'm to report about Samantha as a lesbian woman, which will mean we forget what happened to her, then I should not say it. I will not mention that Samantha is a lesbian, but I must write about the fact that she was violated at Kaleru.
Don't minorities have human rights? Cannot be answered in the affirmative when three things are in place, and yet journalists have not really put them center stage in writing their in doing their journalism, whether it is TV or what. These are three. One, toxic self-centeredness. Two, naked selfishness. Three, non-repentant self-righteousness. I've not seen people who are, because you guys, you are resistors. You shape how society thinks. But I've not seen many articles or many positions, apart from few whom we know, who have really said, I am going to intentionally engage with these values that are driving violence against minorities. Because, I mean, like, if you ask a question, do Palestinians have a right to exist, or children? The Israelite knows it. The Jewish guy that knows it, but because he's self-centered, self-righteous in reasoning, I am right, they are wrong, the rights don't count. So I think we need that level of, we need that help from you. You are also preachers like us. How do we interrogate this colonial way of thinking, that every time you have to look at an issue, you are looking at it from your own angle? I liked what the gentleman from Kenya said, that when we talk about acceptance, we are really talking about acceptance from me who is being ignored, not you. So if you could really take that up and say, by the way, where is this violence coming from? We need journalists who can help us bring out the philosophy, theology, and psychology of emotions. For me, the whole issue I see around me is the whole issue of disgust and repugnance. That you talk about gay and someone wants, they are so disgusted, not just with the gay person, but with also you who was. I remember when I was defending, I had collected signatures, about 30,000 signatures, and I had gone to the speaker by that time was who later became the vice president, the man. But when I left, because it was televised, Gideon Yambisha has led, they are opposing the bill about homosexuality. And so when I left, I drove towards home and I parked on the supermarket to buy some few things to go home. The supermarket owner himself came running before I even stopped the car. And he said, I thought you were a Christian. I said, yes. But I saw you on TV. You were defending gays? Why? I thought you were a Christian. And I said, yeah, exactly, because I'm a Christian, that's why I'm doing it. So this disgust, because we need to get a conversion. How do I get a semper, a so and so, to move from too much disgust to three things which you do when you write about? One, you make someone acknowledge that this issue exists. Then you write in a way that you are driving the reader to acceptance. And then the final stage, you want really to convert the person to support the idea you are writing, or to engage deeper with it, which is similar to affection. Love the story, love the issues it is raising. And for me, reason why I have sort of really had that conversion experience is because of my being left-handed. That I suffered violence from the people who loved me. My mother, my teachers, my pastors, all of them from P1, P2, P3, they stopped beating me around P7, P6. And do you know the reason? That how will they see a son of a religious leader eating with the left hand or writing with the left hand?
Thank you very much, Reverend.
And so that experience helped me to identify the reason why some people have issues, that they are confusing okulemwa with okugana. They are not refusing to be what you want them to be. No, they are themselves. They are themselves. So you're not even. I hear even people using the word promote. You can promoting being left-handed. How? The biggest thing you can do is to affirm the left-handed, but you can't promote them out.
But then, there is a bigger role, task to play, and that is to actually stand out, stand up for the disadvantaged, the minority, the vulnerable, because that's a call of journalism. It calls for real courage as one of their values, and in doing that, they will do a good job at advancing society.
Daniel, I would love you to share just a brief about your experience. Like you mentioned, how did you cope with when you wrote about, I think it was the homosexuality bill, and people were saying you're doing that because you want a visa. I remember that vividly. So how did you cope with that? Because I think that partly creates fear in how journalists think they would be perceived. Yeah? So how did you manage that? Because also these experiences shape how others can act on these different issues.
My experience dealing with that, there were many insults. There were people saying I was looking for a visa. I am still here, so probably that was debunked. I was not looking for any visa. But I think journalists also, for those who don't know, those who are trying to get into the profession, and those who are already in it, maybe who don't know, journalism is a profession of long suffering. You are long suffering. Yes, like priests, exactly, because you are not going to get very rich, but you're going to have a lot of influence on people, and people are going to believe you. So you need to use that power that you have for the limited time that you have it. You must use that power to do good and to try and do as little harm as possible, but also to change people's lives. So the reason why I became a journalist is not to become extremely rich. It is to change people's lives through the stories that I tell. And therefore, some of those things that people were saying against me for writing against stories that were perceived to be against AHA are things that are expected of a journalist. You must be ready, because even stories that I've written about that are not about minorities, stories that are about corruption, stories that are about teenage pregnancies, stories that are about defilement of children, there are still people who insult me over those stories. And you would think that maybe those are things that the whole society agrees about. But every story that you tell, there will always be somebody that feels hurt by it, and they will attack you for that reason.